The morning Jarrett's stagecoach overturned on the mountain pass outside Sheridan, Wyoming. She thought her life was over, but when a bear of a man with muscles that strained his buckskin shirt pulled her from the wreckage, she had no idea her life was just beginning. Blood trickled down her temple as strong hands lifted her clear of the splintered wood. The other passengers were being helped by the driver and shotgun guard, but she could not stop trembling. Her entire body shook like aspens in autumn wind. "Easy now," the man said, his voice a low rumble that somehow cut through her panic. "You are safe." Violet tried to focus on his face. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, tied back with leather cord. His jaw was squared and covered with several days' growth of beard. Eyes the color of a stormy sky assessed her with surprising gentleness given his size. He had to be well over 6 feet tall, broad across the shoulders, with forearms thick as fence posts visible beneath his rolled sleeves. "The horses," she gasped. "They bolted." "Gone over the ridge," he confirmed. Harness broke clean through, rotted leather from the looks of it. The driver was cursing up a storm, checking the other passengers for injuries. An older woman had a twisted ankle. A salesman had a gash on his arm. The shotgun guard had been thrown clear and lay groaning but conscious. Violet realized with growing horror that the stagecoach had nearly gone over the cliff entirely. Only a stand of sturdy pines had stopped their descent into the canyon below. "Can you stand?" the mountain man asked. Violet nodded, but when he released her, her legs buckled. He caught her before she hit the ground, sweeping her up as though she weighed nothing at all. Heat flooded her cheeks. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "Maybe so, but not right now." He carried her to a flat area well away from the wreckage and settled her on a patch of grass. "You hit your head pretty good. Need to sit still a spell." "I have business in Sheridan," she said. "My aunt is expecting me. Sheridan is still 5 miles north." "Nobody is going anywhere until we sort this mess." He studied her with those penetrating eyes. "Name's Isaac Xander. I have a cabin about 2 miles east. Once we get everyone stable, we can figure out the next move." Jarrett. She touched the cut on her forehead and winced. "I need to reach town today. Today is not looking likely." Isaac moved to help the other passengers, his movements efficient despite his size. He seemed to take command naturally, and the driver deferred to him without argument. It became clear quickly that the stagecoach was beyond repair. The axle had cracked, and even if they could right the vehicle, they had no horses to pull it. The driver sent the shotgun guard hiking back to the last way station, a good 8 miles south, to bring help. "Rest of you come with me," Isaac said. "My place is not fancy, but it has 4 walls and a roof. Better than spending the night on this mountain." The older woman with the twisted ankle could not walk. Isaac fashioned a travois from broken pieces of the stagecoach and some rope he had in his pack. The salesman tried to help, but it was clear he was city-bred and unused to physical labor. Isaac handled most of the work himself, those powerful muscles moving beneath his shirt as he secured the makeshift stretcher. Violet attempted to stand again. This time her legs held, though her head spun. She took a few unsteady steps, determined to prove she could manage. "You are pale as milk," Isaac observed. "Let me help. I can walk on my own." Pride stiffened her spine even as the world tilted. He did not argue, but she felt his attention on her as they began the trek to his cabin. The path was rough, barely more than a game trail winding through the pines. Rocks jutted up through the thin soil. Tree roots crossed the path like tripwires. Violet concentrated on placing each foot carefully, but exhaustion dragged at her. The accident had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. She stumbled over a root. Isaac's hand shot out, steadying her with effortless strength. "Thank you," she managed. No shame in accepting help. His voice held no judgment, only practical observation. By the time they reached his cabin, Violet was leaning heavily on his arm. The simple log structure sat in a clearing with a view of the valley below. A small barn stood nearby, and she could see chickens pecking in a fenced area. Smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting he had banked a fire before leaving that morning. Inside, the cabin was spare but clean. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall. A table with 4 chairs stood near the window. A bed frame filled one corner, and she glimpsed another sleeping area in a loft above. Furs and wool blankets added warmth to the rough furnishings. Isaac settled the older woman on his bed and examined her ankle with gentle hands. The salesman collapsed into a chair, breathing hard from the walk. The driver paced restlessly, muttering about schedules and lost cargo. Violet sank onto a bench near the table. Her head throbbed. When Isaac approached with a damp cloth, she accepted it gratefully and pressed it to her temple. "You have medical knowledge," she asked, watching him wrap the older woman's ankle. "You learn a thing or two living out here. Nearest doctor is in Sheridan, and that is a long ride when you are hurt." He finished the bandage and stood. "I will make coffee. You all look like you could use some." The coffee, when it came, was strong enough to strip paint. Violet sipped carefully, feeling the warmth spread through her. Isaac moved around the cabin with quiet competence, setting out biscuits and jerky, checking that everyone was as comfortable as possible. "You live here alone?" the older woman asked. Her name was Martha. Violet had learned during the walk. She was traveling to visit her daughter in Sheridan. 5 years now," Isaac said. "I trap during winter, hunt and trade the rest of the year. It suits me." "Lonely life," Martha observed. "Peaceful." He glanced at Violet. "You should lie down. That head injury needs rest." "I am fine." The words came out sharper than she intended. She did not like feeling helpless, did not like depending on strangers. She had come west to start a new life, to escape the suffocating confines of Boston society and her parents' expectations. Independence was important to her. Isaac did not push. He simply continued caring for his unexpected guests, moving with the calm assurance of a man accustomed to handling whatever challenges arose. As afternoon faded into evening, it became clear they would all be spending the night. Isaac gave up his bed to Martha and spread bedrolls in the loft for himself and the salesman. He offered Violet the remaining corner near the fireplace, screened by a blanket hung from the rafters for privacy. She lay awake long after the others slept, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the mountain night. Owls hooted in the pines. Something rustled through the underbrush outside. The fire crackled and popped, and through it all, she was acutely aware of Isaac's steady breathing from the loft above. He had been nothing but kind, yet something about him unsettled her. Perhaps it was his size, the raw physical power evident in every movement, or perhaps it was the way his eyes seemed to see straight through her careful composure to the fear beneath. She had been frightened before the accident, anxious about meeting the aunt she barely knew, worried about making her way in this wild country. The crash had simply brought all that fear rushing to the surface. She touched the cut on her forehead gingerly. It had stopped bleeding, but the skin around it was swollen and tender. She would have a nasty bruise by morning. Sleep finally claimed her, but her dreams were troubled. She was falling, the stagecoach tumbling end over end down the mountainside. She reached for something to hold on to, but there was only empty air and the terrible certainty that she was about to die. She woke with a gasp, her heart pounding. Gray dawn light filtered through the window. The cabin was quiet. She sat up carefully, her head still aching but not as badly as the night before. Isaac was already awake. She could see him through the window, splitting firewood near the barn. His shirt was off despite the morning chill, and she found herself staring at the play of muscles across his back and shoulders. He moved with rhythmic precision, the axe rising and falling, logs splitting cleanly under each blow. She looked away quickly, heat rising in her cheeks. It was improper to stare, yet something about the scene held her attention. There was beauty in such simple competence, in strength harnessed to purpose. By the time he came inside, she had composed herself. The others were stirring, and soon the small cabin was bustling with morning activity. Isaac made breakfast, frying salt pork and heating leftover biscuits. It was plain fare, but Violet found she was ravenous. "The way station should send help today," the driver said between mouthfuls. "Probably be afternoon before they arrive, though." "You are all welcome to stay as long as needed," Isaac said. He glanced at Violet. "How is your head?" "Better." She managed a smile. "Thank you for your hospitality." "Not much choice in the matter. Could not very well leave you all on the mountain." He paused. "Your aunt in Sheridan, she will be worried. I can ride ahead, let her know you are safe." "Would you?" Relief flooded through her. "Her name is Margaret Holbrook. She runs a boarding house on Main Street. I know the place." Isaac finished his breakfast and stood. "I will head out shortly." "I could write a note," Violet offered. He nodded, and she found paper and pencil in his simple writing desk. Her hand trembled slightly as she wrote, explaining the accident and promising to arrive as soon as possible. Isaac watched her write, and she was suddenly conscious of her elaborate script, so different from the rough country around her. "Went to school back east?" he asked. "Boston. My father is a banker." She sealed the note and handed it to him. "He was not pleased when I decided to come west. Long way from home. That was rather the point." She met his eyes. "I wanted something different, something real." Something flickered in his expression, understanding perhaps. "West will give you that for better or worse. It does not coddle." "I do not want coddling." But even as she said it, she remembered her terror after the crash, the way she had clung to him. Some pioneer woman she was turning out to be. Isaac pulled on a wool shirt and jacket, then headed for the barn. She watched through the window as he saddled a massive bay horse. The animal stood at least 16 hands with a chest like a barrel. It suited him, she thought. Everything about Isaac Xander was larger than life. He rode out without further farewell, the bay moving easily despite the rough terrain. Violet found herself at loose ends. Martha was dozing, her ankle propped on pillows. The salesman and driver were playing cards with a worn deck Isaac had produced. She had no desire to join them. She stepped outside, breathing in the crisp mountain air. The view was spectacular. Pine-covered slopes stretched in every direction, and in the distance, she could see the snow-capped peaks of the Bighorn Mountains. The sky was impossibly blue, unmarred by the coal smoke that perpetually hazed Boston streets. A chicken clucked nearby, scratching industriously at the dirt. Violet wandered over to the coop and found 3 fresh eggs in the nesting boxes. She gathered them carefully, remembering childhood summers at her grandmother's farm. That had been before her parents insisted she become a proper lady, before endless deportment lessons and social calls. She took the eggs inside and found a basket for them. The cabin held evidence of Isaac's solitary life. A rifle hung over the door. Traps and pelts were stacked neatly in one corner. Books lined a small shelf, their titles surprising: Shakespeare, Homer, essays by Emerson. So he was educated, this mountain man. That intrigued her. The day crawled past. Martha woke and they chatted about inconsequential things. The older woman had lived in Wyoming for 30 years, following her army husband from post to post until his retirement. She had stories about Indian raids and blizzards, droughts and prairie fires. Violet listened, fascinated. This was the real West, not the romanticized version in dime novels. Late afternoon brought the sound of approaching horses. The driver rushed outside, then let out a whoop. They made it. Two fresh horses pulled a wagon up the trail, with Isaac riding alongside. He had brought Violet's trunk from the wrecked stagecoach, along with the other passengers' belongings. Behind the wagon came a rider leading two additional saddle horses. "Thought you folks might want to ride instead of rattling around in a wagon," Isaac said, dismounting. "Sheridan is not that far, but the road is rough." Martha would travel in the wagon with her injured ankle. The driver and salesman would ride the saddle horses. Isaac looked at Violet. "Can you ride?" he asked. She hesitated. The truth was she had ridden as a child, but never alone, always with a groom leading her docile mare around a ring. The horses before her were nothing like that gentle creature. They were range-bred, spirited animals that danced and tossed their heads. "I have some experience," she said carefully. Isaac's eyes narrowed. He had an uncanny ability to read what she left unsaid. "How much experience?" "Enough." Pride again stiffening her spine. She could not admit weakness, not here, not now. "The chestnut is gentle," he said after a moment. "Saddle broke, easy mouth, I will lead her for you." "That is not necessary, I can manage." "Violet." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so the others could not hear. "There is no shame in admitting you are afraid. These mountain trails are nothing like a city bridle path. One wrong step and you could go over the edge." Her cheeks burned. "I am not afraid." "Yes, you are. I can see it in your eyes." His voice was gentle but implacable. "Let me help you." She wanted to refuse, wanted to prove she was capable, independent, equal to this wild country. But her hands were shaking at just the thought of mounting that horse alone, of guiding it down those treacherous switchbacks with nothing but a long fall waiting if she made a mistake. "I will ride with you," he said. "On my horse. The bay can carry us both easily." The relief was so intense it nearly buckled her knees. "What about your saddle horse?" "I will tie him to the wagon. He will follow." Isaac moved to the bay and swung up into the saddle, then extended his hand. "Come on." She placed her small hand in his large one and felt herself lifted effortlessly. He settled her in front of him, one muscular arm circling her waist to hold her steady. She was acutely aware of his body against her back, the solid warmth of him, the strength in the arm that held her safe. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The bay moved out, following the wagon down the trail. Isaac rode with relaxed confidence, one hand on the reins, the other steady at her waist. She tried to hold herself stiff and separate, but the horse's movement made that impossible. She swayed with each step, pressed against Isaac's chest. "Relax," he murmured. "Fighting it will only make you sore." She let herself lean back slightly. His heart beat steady against her shoulder blade. The arm around her waist was like iron, absolutely secure. For the first time since the crash, she felt safe. The trail descended through groves of aspen and pine. Afternoon, sun slanted through the branches, dappling the path with light and shadow. Birds called from the trees. A deer watched them pass, ears pricked forward, then bounded away through the undergrowth. "It is beautiful here," Violet said softly. "Best place I have ever been." Isaac guided the bay around a rocky outcrop. "Came west after the war, needed somewhere quiet. You fought 4 years." His voice went flat. "Saw things no man should see. Lost friends, nearly lost myself." He paused. "The mountains brought me back. The silence, the clean air, the simpleness of just surviving day to day, it healed something in me." She heard the pain beneath his words and understood it, though her wounds were different. "I was drowning," she said. "In Boston, in my parents' expectations, in all the rules about what a proper lady should be. I felt like I was suffocating. So you came west." Aunt Margaret wrote that she needed help with the boarding house. My parents were horrified, but I was desperate. She laughed, a brittle sound. And here I am, unable to even ride a horse alone, some frontier woman. You will learn. His arm tightened fractionally. Takes time to adjust. Do not judge yourself so harshly. They rode in comfortable silence for a while. The wagon ahead kicked up dust that hung golden in the slanting light. Martha called out something to the driver, her voice cheerful despite her injury. The salesman was singing off-key, butchering a popular tune. "Why did you help us?" Violet asked. "You could have just ridden past the wreck." "That is not who I am." Isaac's voice was firm. "Out here you help folks. Life is hard enough without people turning their backs on each other. Not everyone feels that way." "No, but I do." He was quiet a moment. "I was helped when I needed it. Confederate soldier found me after Shiloh, half dead from a gut wound. Should have left me, I was Union. But he patched me up, got me to a field hospital. Never even knew his name." She felt him shrug. "Figure I owe it to pass that kindness along." Violet found her eyes stinging with unexpected tears. There was such fundamental decency in this mountain man, such quiet honor. He lived alone by choice, but he was not isolated by temperament. He cared about people, about doing what was right. "Your aunt will be glad to see you," Isaac said, changing the subject. "Margaret Holbrook is a good woman, runs a tight ship but fair. You will be safe with her. You know her well, well enough. I bring meat and pelts to town every few weeks. She has fed me more than once, refused payment though I offered," he chuckled. "Stubborn woman." "It runs in the family," Violet admitted. She felt rather than heard his laugh, a rumble in his chest. The sound warmed her. She realized with some surprise that she liked being close to him, liked the security of his strength, the steadiness of his presence. It was not a feeling she had expected. As they descended toward the valley floor, the trail widened. Houses began appearing, small homesteads carved from the wilderness. Sheridan emerged gradually, a collection of wooden buildings clustered along a main street. It was larger than Violet had anticipated, bustling with activity even in late afternoon. Isaac guided the bay through the traffic with easy competence. Cowboys on horseback, wagons loaded with goods, women with shopping baskets, children playing in the street. The town hummed with life. Margaret Holbrook's boarding house was a tall, narrow building painted white with green shutters. Isaac pulled up in front and dismounted, then reached up to help Violet down. His hands spanned her waist easily, lowering her gently to the ground. Before she could thank him, the front door flew open and a woman emerged. She was in her 50s, Violet estimated, with gray-streaked brown hair pinned in a no-nonsense bun. Her face was lined but kind, and her eyes were the same blue as Violet's father's. "Violet!" Aunt Margaret hurried down the steps and pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Isaac told me about the accident. Are you hurt? Just a bump on the head." Violet returned the hug, feeling tears threaten again. The warmth of the welcome was overwhelming after her cold departure from Boston. Margaret released her and turned to Isaac. "Thank you for bringing her safely. Will you stay for supper? Should get back to the cabin before full dark." But he hesitated, his eyes finding Violet's. "Please," she heard herself say. "I would like to thank you properly for all your help." Something flickered in his expression, pleasure perhaps or surprise. "If it is no trouble." "Never a trouble," Margaret said firmly. She turned to help Martha from the wagon, clucking over the injured ankle. "Come on, all of you. Let me feed you before you continue on." The boarding house interior was warm and welcoming. Lace curtains framed the windows. A large dining room held several tables covered in checkered cloth. The smell of baking bread filled the air, underlaid with savory notes of roasting meat. Margaret installed Martha in a ground floor room and sent someone for the doctor. She showed Violet to a small but comfortable room on the second floor, with a real bed and washstand, even a mirror on the wall. Violet's trunk arrived shortly, carried up by a young man Margaret introduced as her hired hand. Violet washed her face and hands, wincing when she saw the bruise on her temple in the mirror. It was spectacular, purple and green spreading from the cut. She changed her dusty, torn traveling dress for a simple calico, brushed and repinned her hair. When she looked at herself again, she saw a different woman than the one who had left Boston. This woman had survived a stagecoach crash, had spent a night in a mountain cabin, had ridden 5 miles pressed against a man's chest. This woman was braver than she knew. Downstairs, the dining room was filling with boarders returning from their various occupations. Margaret introduced them in a blur of names Violet knew she would not remember. A shopkeeper, a clerk, a schoolteacher, a widow. They welcomed her kindly, asked polite questions about her journey. Isaac sat at one end of the table, looking out of place among the townfolk in their neat clothes. His buckskins and wool shirt marked him as different, but no one seemed to mind. He answered questions about the accident, his deep voice carrying easily through the room. Violet found herself seated beside him. Margaret served the meal herself, roast beef, potatoes, carrots, fresh bread still warm from the oven. It was simple food but delicious. Violet ate hungrily, surprised by her appetite. "You are looking better," Isaac observed quietly. "I feel better." She met his eyes. "Thanks to you. You are stronger than you think." He cut a piece of beef with his knife. "You walked 2 miles on a mountain trail with a head injury. That is not nothing. I nearly collapsed. But you did not." He smiled, and it transformed his stern face into something surprisingly gentle. "Give yourself some credit." After dinner, most of the boarders retired to the parlor. Margaret brought out coffee and a dried apple pie. Violet sat near the fire, exhausted but content. Isaac stood by the door, clearly preparing to leave. "Thank you again," she said, rising to see him out, "for everything." "No thanks needed." He settled his hat on his head. "Margaret will take good care of you. Will you visit town again soon?" The words escaped before she could stop them. He looked at her for a long moment. "I come in every few weeks, bring meat and hides to trade. Perhaps I will see you then. Perhaps." His gray eyes held hers. "Be well, Violet Jarrett." Then he was gone, out into the night. She stood at the window and watched him mount the bay, watched him ride down the street until the darkness swallowed him. Something in her chest ached, though she could not have said why. Margaret came to stand beside her. "He is a good man," she said softly. "Helped me more than once when supplies ran short in winter, never asked for anything in return. He lives very isolated, by choice. The war damaged him, though he hides it well." Margaret squeezed her shoulder. "Now you must be exhausted. Let me show you where things are, then off to bed with you." The next days passed in a blur of activity. Margaret taught Violet the rhythms of the boarding house: breakfast at 6, dinner at noon, supper at 6. Washing on Monday, ironing on Tuesday, baking on Wednesday. Sheets changed weekly, floors swept daily, guests treated with courtesy no matter their mood. Violet threw herself into the work. Her hands, soft from Boston's easy life, roughened with scrubbing and kneading. Her back ached from bending over washtubs and carrying water. But there was satisfaction in the labor, in seeing tangible results from her efforts. The boarders were kind. The schoolteacher, Elizabeth Grant, became a friend. She was only a few years older than Violet, a slim woman with sharp intelligence and a dry sense of humor. They talked long into the evening sometimes about books and ideas, about the challenges of life in the territories. "Most women out here work hard," Elizabeth said one evening. There is no room for idleness, but there is freedom too. We can own property, run businesses. Back east, we are perpetual children under law. Here, we are people. Violet had never thought of it that way, but Elizabeth was right. For all its rough edges, the West offered opportunities that refined Boston never would. She began to see her new life not as exile but as liberation. 3 weeks after her arrival, Isaac returned to town. Violet was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard his voice from the front of the house. Her heart jumped unexpectedly. She smoothed her apron, pushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear, then scolded herself for such vanity. But when she came around to the front, she could not help her smile. Isaac stood beside a loaded pack horse, talking to Margaret about venison and rabbit pelts. He looked the same, wind-burned and powerful, his long hair tied back, his gray eyes calm. Then he saw her and his face changed. Surprise flickered across his features, followed by something warmer. "Violet, you look well. The mountain air agrees with me." She descended the steps, acutely aware of her work-worn dress and rough hands. She must look like a washerwoman. "How have you been?" "Well enough. Winter is coming early this year. Snow in the high country already." He handed the pelts to Margaret, who disappeared inside to fetch payment. Alone with Violet, he seemed uncertain. "You are settling in. Your aunt is not working you too hard." "I like the work. It feels real, purposeful." She laughed. "Nothing like embroidery and calling cards." "No, I imagine not." He shifted his weight. "I was thinking, if you still wanted to learn to ride properly, I could teach you. The boarding house has a stable, does it not?" Her pulse quickened. "It does. 2 horses. But I do not want to impose on your time." "No imposition. You cannot live out here without riding. It is a necessary skill." His voice was casual, but his eyes were intent. "Tomorrow morning, early before the heat of the day." "Yes," the word came out breathless. "Thank you." Margaret returned with coins for the meat and pelts. Isaac loaded his payment into saddlebags, spoke a few words of farewell, then mounted the bay. But before he rode away, he looked back at Violet. "Dawn tomorrow," he said. "Bring gloves if you have them." She could barely sleep that night. Excitement warred with nervousness. She wanted to learn, wanted to overcome her fear, but the memory of those dancing horses from the mountain trail haunted her. What if she failed? What if she proved too frightened, too incompetent? At dawn she dressed in her simplest dress and sturdiest shoes. She had gloves, soft leather ones that had been for church. They would have to do. Margaret was already in the kitchen kneading bread dough. "Isaac is a patient teacher," her aunt said without looking up. "Do not worry so much." Violet flushed. "I am not worried. Of course not." But Margaret's eyes twinkled. "Just be yourself. That is enough." Isaac was waiting at the stable when she arrived. He had brought his own horse, the patient chestnut that he had offered on the mountain. The horse stood placidly, utterly unlike the spirited animals Violet had feared. "This is Clover," Isaac said. 15 years old, calm as a pond. She was my first horse out here. I trust her completely." Violet approached slowly. Clover turned her head and regarded her with large, liquid eyes. There was nothing threatening in that gaze, only mild curiosity. "Touch her," Isaac encouraged. "Let her smell you." Violet extended her hand. Clover's nose was soft as velvet against her palm. The horse snuffled, then blew out a breath that made Violet laugh. "See, she likes you already." Isaac showed her how to stroke the neck, how to speak in low, soothing tones. Horses respond to confidence. If you are nervous, they feel it. But if you are calm, they calm too. He taught her how to saddle the horse, explaining each strap and buckle. His hands were sure and gentle, tightening cinches, adjusting stirrups. Violet watched closely, trying to memorize every step. "Now mount," he said, her heart hammered. The saddle looked impossibly high, but Isaac stood beside her, solid and reassuring. Left foot in the stirrup, he instructed. Grab the saddle horn. Pull yourself up and swing your right leg over. She tried. Her skirt tangled and she hopped awkwardly on one foot. Isaac's hand steadied her. Again, he said patiently. This time she made it, though not gracefully. She settled into the saddle, gripping the horn with white knuckles. The ground seemed very far away. Good, Isaac said. Now take the reins, not too tight. Clover knows what to do, you just need to guide her gently. He led them to an open area behind the stable, a flat field where no one would observe her fumbling attempts. Then he taught her the basics: how to walk the horse forward with gentle pressure from her legs, how to stop with a pull on the reins, how to turn left and right. Clover was patient, responding to Violet's clumsy commands without fuss. Slowly, very slowly, Violet began to relax. The rhythm of the horse's walk was pleasant. The morning sun warmed her shoulders. Isaac walked beside her, his voice a steady stream of instruction and encouragement. "You are doing well," he said after an hour. "A natural." "I am terrified," she admitted. "I know, but you are doing it anyway. That is what courage is." They practiced until the sun climbed high. By then Violet was sore and exhausted, but also exhilarated. She had done it. She had ridden a horse, alone, without anyone leading her or holding her up. Isaac helped her dismount. Her legs wobbled when her feet hit the ground, and he steadied her with his hands on her waist. They stood close, his face above hers, his gray eyes warm with approval. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes," she breathed. "Please." He returned the next day and the next and the next. Each morning they met at dawn. Each morning he taught her something new: how to trot, how to navigate obstacles, how to read a horse's mood. And each morning Violet grew a little braver, a little more confident. She began to look forward to those lessons more than she cared to admit. It was not just the riding, though she did love the freedom of it, the wind in her hair, the power of the animal beneath her. It was Isaac himself, the quiet strength of his presence, the patience of his teaching, the way his rare smiles made her heart skip. She caught herself watching him when she should be concentrating on her riding. The way he moved, all controlled grace despite his size. The way his hands gentled the horses, firm but kind. The way his voice dropped when he praised her progress, warm as summer honey. After 2 weeks, he pronounced her ready for a trail ride. "Not far," he said. "Just up to the ridge where you can see the valley." But real terrain, not this flat practice field. Violet was nervous but determined. She had come so far. She would not back down now. They set out on a Sunday afternoon when Margaret could spare her. Isaac rode the bay, Violet the gentle Clover. They left Sheridan behind, heading into the foothills. The trail climbed steadily, winding through stands of pine and aspen. Violet focused on her riding, on keeping her seat as the horse navigated the uneven ground. "You are stiff," Isaac observed. "Relax your hips. Move with the horse." She tried and gradually found the rhythm. It was like dancing, she realized. A partnership between rider and horse, each responding to the other. They emerged onto a rocky outcrop with a breathtaking view. The valley spread below them, patchwork fields and winding river, the town a small cluster of buildings in the distance. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks white with early snow. "Oh," Violet breathed. "It is beautiful." Isaac dismounted and came to help her down. She slid from the saddle, landing closer to him than she intended. For a moment they stood frozen, his hand still at her waist, her palms resting on his chest. "Violet," he said, and her name in his deep voice was a caress. "Yes, I should not." But he did not step back. "You are a lady, educated, from a good family. I am a mountain man. We are from different worlds." "I do not care about that." Her heart raced. "I care about your kindness, your strength, The way you see me, truly see me, not some porcelain doll to be protected and coddled. I do see you." His eyes blazed. Brave and stubborn, determined to conquer your fear, beautiful even in work-worn calico, too good for a broken soldier with nothing but a cabin and some traps. "Let me decide what is good for me." She rose on her toes, closing the distance between them. "Kiss me, Isaac, please." He groaned, a sound of surrender, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning. She answered by pressing closer, her hands sliding up to his shoulders. He deepened the kiss, one hand tangling in her hair, the other tight at the small of her back. She had been kissed before, chased pecks from Boston boys under watchful chaperone eyes. This was nothing like those bloodless encounters. This was fire and need, passion tempered by tenderness. This was a man who wanted her but held himself in check, who gave her space to retreat if she chose. She did not choose retreat. She kissed him back with all the feelings she had been suppressing for weeks, pouring into the kiss everything she could not yet say. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I am not good at pretty words," he said roughly. "Not like those educated men you knew back east, but I care for you, Violet, more than I have cared for anyone in a long time. I do not need pretty words, I need honesty." She cupped his face, feeling the rasp of beard beneath her palm. "I care for you too, so much it frightens me sometimes." "You frightened?" He managed a smile. "The woman who rode a horse alone up a mountain trail, I am not alone." She kissed him again softly. "You are with me." They stood together in the afternoon sun, holding each other while the horses grazed peacefully nearby. Violet had never felt so safe, so perfectly where she belonged. Eventually they had to return to town. Reality awaited, work and responsibilities, propriety and expectation. Isaac was quiet on the ride back, his expression troubled. "What is wrong?" Violet asked as they approached the stable. "People will talk." He dismounted and came to help her down. "About us. About a man like me courting a woman like you. Let them talk. Your aunt may not approve. Your father certainly will not." His hands fell away from her waist. "I do not want to cause problems for you. The only problem would be if you stopped coming." She held his gaze. "I am not fragile, Isaac. I can handle gossip. What I cannot handle is you walking away because you think I am too delicate for the real world." He studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "All right, but we go slow. I will court you properly. Let people get used to seeing us together." "Properly?" She could not help her smile. "Like a gentleman. I clean up decent." He sounded offended. "I do own proper clothes, wore them in the war. I like you just as you are." She meant it. His rough edges, his buckskins and long hair, the way he stood apart from polite society. All of it appealed to her in ways her Boston suitors never had. He left shortly after, but not before arranging their next lesson. Violet floated through the evening chores, barely hearing Margaret's pointed questions about how the ride had gone. She was too busy reliving those kisses, the feel of Isaac's arms around her, the certainty that she had found something rare and precious. Over the following weeks, Isaac became a regular presence in town. He came more frequently than his trading required, finding excuses to visit the boarding house. He took Violet riding, always properly, never straying far from the acceptable. But in small moments, a stolen kiss behind the stable, hands clasped under the dinner table, heated glances across crowded rooms, their connection deepened. Margaret watched with sharp eyes but said nothing directly. The boarders speculated, as people do. The schoolteacher Elizabeth teased Violet gently about her mountain man. But there was no real censure, no social ostracism. Perhaps the West was more forgiving of unconventional courtships, Or perhaps people simply recognized genuine feeling when they saw it. As autumn progressed toward winter, Isaac grew restless. "I need to go back to my cabin," he told Violet one crisp October morning. "Lay in supplies, prepare for snow. I will be gone at least 2 weeks. I will miss you." She touched his face, memorizing the lines of it. "Miss you too." He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "I will be back soon. Stay safe." He rode out that afternoon, his pack horse loaded with provisions. Violet watched until he disappeared from sight, feeling the ache of his absence already. The days without him dragged. She threw herself into work, helping Margaret prepare the boarding house for winter. They sealed windows against drafts, filled the root cellar with preserved vegetables, stacked firewood in towering cords. The first snows came, dusting the mountains white. 2 weeks passed. 3. Violet began to worry. What if something had happened? What if he was injured, alone in that isolated cabin with no one to help 4 weeks? Margaret tried to reassure her. "He is fine. Winter preparations take time. He will come when he can." But Violet could not shake her unease. She had nightmares about avalanches, about Isaac trapped and freezing. She started awake, heart pounding, reaching for a presence that was not there. On the 30th day, the boarding house door opened and Isaac walked in. He was snow-dusted and wind-burned, but whole and healthy. Violet flew across the room and threw herself into his arms, propriety forgotten. "You are all right," she gasped against his chest. "Of course." He held her tight, his cheek resting on her hair. "I am sorry I worried you. The snow came heavy in the high country. I could not get down the pass safely until it cleared." She pulled back enough to look at him. "I thought something terrible had happened. I am fine. Takes more than a little snow to stop me." But his eyes were serious. "I hated being away from you. Then do not go back." The words escaped before she could stop them. "Stay here. Move to town," he stiffened. "This is my home, Violet. The cabin, the mountains. I cannot just abandon it." "I am not asking you to abandon anything. Just consider it, please." She heard the pleading in her voice and hated it, but could not stop. "It terrifies me, you alone up there where anything could happen and no one would know. I have lived that way for 5 years. His voice was gentle but firm. "I know how to take care of myself. I know, but I love you." There she had said it, the words hung between them. "I love you and I cannot bear the thought of losing you." Isaac closed his eyes. When he opened them, they shone with emotion. "I love you too. Have for a while now, though I tried not to. You have gotten under my skin, Violet Jarrett. Into my heart." She kissed him, pouring into it all her fear and relief and love. He responded with the same intensity, his arms like bands around her. When they broke apart, Margaret was standing in the parlor doorway, arms crossed. But she was smiling. "About time you two figured it out," she said. "Now, Isaac, you will stay for supper. Violet has been moping like a lost puppy for a month. Least you can do is feed the girl's soul." That winter was the coldest on record, but Violet barely noticed. Isaac stayed in town, taking a room at the boarding house. He worked odd jobs, chopping wood, making repairs, hunting meat for the town's families. He was uncomfortable with town life, she could tell, restless in the confines of buildings and streets. But he stayed for her. They spent every free moment together. He taught her to handle a rifle, to track animals in snow, to read the weather by the shape of clouds. She taught him to dance properly, to enjoy the novels from her small collection, to sit still through one of Elizabeth's literary discussions. They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their pasts. He told her about the war, about the friends he had lost, about the nightmares that sometimes woke him. She told him about the suffocation of Boston society, about parents who loved her but could not understand her, about the loneliness of being different. "We are both refugees," she said one evening, curled against him on the parlor sofa. Margaret had given up chaperoning them, trusting them to maintain propriety. Running from something, maybe, Isaac stroked her hair, or running towards something, found more peace in 5 years on my mountain than I had my whole life before. Will you miss it terribly, living here in town? He was quiet a long time. Yes, he finally said, but I would miss you more. As winter released its grip and spring arrived, Isaac grew increasingly tense. Violet knew he was thinking about his cabin, about the mountains, about the life he had built there. She tried not to cling, tried not to make him feel guilty for his restlessness. But it hurt, watching him stare out the window toward the high peaks, seeing the longing in his eyes. "You should go," she said one April morning. They were walking beside the creek that ran through town, watching the water run high with snowmelt. "Back to your cabin. You have been away too long." "I do not want to leave you. I know, but you are not happy here." She took his hand. "I see it. You are a creature of the mountains, Isaac. The town is a cage for you. Come with me." He stopped, turning to face her. "Marry me. Come live with me on the mountain." Her heart leaped. "Marry you? Yes." He pulled her closer. "I know I am not what you imagined when you dreamed of a husband. I cannot give you a fine house or society or culture, just a rough cabin and a hard life. But I can promise to love you, to protect you, to do everything in my power to make you happy." "Yes," she laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you. The cabin sounds like paradise." He kissed her, lifting her off her feet, spinning her around. When he set her down, they were both laughing like children. They married a week later in a simple ceremony. The preacher spoke the words. Isaac placed a plain gold band on her finger, and they were husband and wife. Margaret cried. Elizabeth threw rice. The boarders cheered. That night in Isaac's rented room, he made love to her with exquisite tenderness. She had been nervous, uncertain what to expect, but he was patient, guiding her through the initial discomfort to pleasure beyond anything she had imagined. Afterwards, she lay in his arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. "I was so frightened that day on the mountain," she murmured, "after the crash, terrified of the horses, of the wild country, of everything." "I know." His hand stroked her bare back. "You hid it well." "Not from you. You saw right through me." She propped herself up to look at him. "But you rode behind me, kept me safe until I found my courage. You always had courage. You just needed to believe in it." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You are the bravest person I know, Violet. Coming west alone, working hard without complaint, facing your fears. You inspire me." "We inspire each other." She kissed him softly. "That is what love is, I think, making each other braver, better, more than we could be alone." They spent a week in town, allowing Violet to say her goodbyes and prepare for the move. Margaret was sad to lose her help, but happy for her happiness. She loaded them with supplies, blankets, preserved food, practical gifts for mountain living. "You visit," Margaret commanded, hugging Violet fiercely. "Do not disappear into those mountains and forget about your old aunt." "Never," Violet promised. "We will come down regularly." Elizabeth gave her a packet of books. "For the long winter nights, you will need something to read." The morning they left Sheridan, Violet felt no fear. She sat astride Clover, confident in her riding now, eager for the journey ahead. Isaac rode beside her on the bay, leading a pack horse loaded with their possessions. The trail to his cabin took 2 days. They camped one night beside a rushing stream, sleeping under the stars, wrapped together in blankets. Violet had never known such peace. The night sky blazed with stars, more than she had ever seen through Boston's coal haze. An owl hooted nearby. The stream sang its endless song. "This is where I belong," she said softly. "With you in the wild places." "This is home," Isaac agreed. "Our home now." They reached the cabin late afternoon of the second day. It looked just as Violet remembered from that first frightening night after the crash, but now it was not a place of refuge from disaster. It was simply home. Isaac carried her over the threshold, laughing at the tradition. Then he set her down and watched anxiously as she surveyed her new domain. The cabin was clean, the hearth cold but ready to light. His belongings were sparse, the furniture she remembered, some pots and pans, traps and tools. But there was room for her things, space to make it theirs. "We can build on," he said. "Add a room or two, make it bigger, more comfortable." "It is perfect." She turned to him. "We are here together. That is all that matters." That first year tested them both. Winter came hard and early, trapping them in the cabin for weeks at a stretch. Violet learned to cook over an open fire, to preserve meat, to make soap and candles. Her hands grew rough, her body strong. She helped Isaac with the traps, learned to skin animals without flinching, to recognize animal tracks in snow. It was hard work, harder than anything she had known in Boston or even at the boarding house. But it was satisfying in a way that her old life had never been. Each day brought tangible accomplishments. Food prepared, wood chopped, repairs made. She went to bed exhausted and woke eager to begin again, and through it all there was Isaac. His steady presence, his quiet strength, his love evident in 1,000 small ways. Wood chopped and stacked without being asked. Coffee made on cold mornings while she slept late. His arms around her at night, solid and warm, keeping the darkness at bay. Spring brought visitors. Margaret made the journey with supplies and news from town. She stayed a week, helping Violet plant a kitchen garden, teaching her mountain remedies. She approved of how the newlyweds had settled in, how happy they clearly were. Summer was glorious. Violet learned to love the mountains as Isaac did, the clean air and vast silences, the way weather could be seen approaching from miles away. She grew confident on horseback, riding beside Isaac to check trap lines, to hunt, to simply explore. Her fear was a distant memory now. On a golden afternoon in late August, she told him she was pregnant. They were sitting on a rocky outcrop above the cabin, watching an eagle soar over the valley below. She had been gathering courage all day, uncertain how he would react. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply. Isaac went very still. Then slowly he turned to her. "A baby? Yes, in February, I think." She searched his face anxiously. "Are you pleased?" For answer, he pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe. "Pleased does not begin to cover it." His voice was rough with emotion. "A child, our child. You are not worried about bringing a baby into this hard life. Every life is hard in its way, but our child will be loved, protected, raised in beauty and freedom." He pulled back to look at her. "You are not worried." "Terrified," she admitted, "but also joyful. We are creating something new, Isaac, a family." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, his hand resting on her still flat belly. "I love you," he murmured. "Thank you for this gift." They began preparing immediately. Isaac built a cradle from pine, sanding it smooth, carving animals along the sides. Violet sewed tiny clothes from soft fabric Margaret brought on her next visit. They discussed names endlessly, settling finally on Samuel if a boy, Sarah if a girl. Winter arrived again, and with it, Violet's time drew near. Isaac wanted to take her to town to be near the doctor, but she refused. "I want our baby born here," she said. "In our home. Margaret will come to help. That is enough." Margaret arrived in late January, riding up through snow to the cabin. She had delivered dozens of babies over her years in the territory. She examined Violet, pronounced her healthy and strong, and settled in to wait. The baby came on a cold February night. Violet labored for hours, Isaac holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. Margaret was calm and competent, guiding her through each contraction. Finally, as dawn light touched the mountains, their son was born. Samuel Isaac, squalling and red-faced and perfect. Isaac wept openly as Margaret placed the baby in his arms, tears streaming into his beard. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "Welcome home." Violet watched through exhausted tears as her mountain man cradled their son with exquisite gentleness. This strong man who could split logs and kill bears held their tiny baby as though he were made of spun glass. "He has your eyes," she said, "and your determination. Listen to those lungs." But Isaac was smiling, utterly besotted. Those early months were a blur of sleepless nights and constant demands. But they navigated it together, taking turns walking the floor with a fussy baby, sharing the endless work of caring for a newborn in rough conditions. Samuel thrived, growing rounder and more alert each day. Spring came again. Margaret visited and brought news that Violet's parents wanted to meet their grandson. They had written to Margaret, stiffly acknowledging their daughter's marriage and the baby's birth. They proposed a visit. "I do not know," Violet said uncertainly. "They were so angry when I left." "People change," Margaret said. "A grandchild can soften the hardest heart, at least consider it." After much discussion, Violet wrote inviting her parents for a summer visit. She was not sure they would come, not sure she even wanted them to. But she felt she owed them the chance. They arrived in June, looking thoroughly out of place. Her father in his banker's suit, her mother in elaborate traveling dress. They stared at the cabin with barely concealed horror. But when Violet placed Samuel in her mother's arms, something shifted. "Oh," her mother breathed. "Oh, he is beautiful." The visit was awkward but not disastrous. Her father was stiff with Isaac at first, unable to reconcile this rough mountain man with his image of an acceptable son-in-law. But watching Isaac with Samuel, seeing the love and gentleness, seemed to reassure him somewhat. Her mother cried when they left. "I wish you were closer," she said, holding Violet tight. "I wish you had an easier life." "I have exactly the life I want," Violet said firmly. "I am happy, Mother." "Truly happy." "I see that." Her mother managed a smile. "You have grown so strong, I barely recognize the girl who left Boston." "That girl was lost," Violet said. "This woman is found." After her parents left, life settled into comfortable rhythms. Samuel grew from baby to toddler, learning to walk on the rough cabin floor, to say "Mama" and "Papa," to pet the horses with gentle hands. Violet taught him letters and numbers, read to him from her precious books. Isaac taught him about animals and weather, about respect for the wild places that were their home. 2 years after Samuel's birth, Violet bore a daughter, Lydia Margaret, named for both grandmothers. She had Isaac's gray eyes and Violet's determination, a fierce little thing from the start. Samuel adored his baby sister, bringing her flowers and smooth stones, singing her the songs Violet had taught him. The years flowed past, marked by the turning seasons. Winters snowed them in. Springs brought new growth and baby animals. Summers were filled with long golden days. Autumns painted the aspens gold and red. Through it all, Isaac and Violet's love deepened, tempered by challenges, strengthened by shared joys and sorrows. They built additions to the cabin, expanding it into a proper house. They added chickens and a milk cow, a larger garden, a workshop where Isaac could work on winter days. Violet's fears seemed like memories from another lifetime. This confident woman who could ride for hours, who could handle a rifle, who could deliver a calf or stitch a wound, bore little resemblance to the frightened girl on the mountain trail. But sometimes, sitting on their porch in the evening, watching their children play, she would remember. Remember Isaac lifting her from the wrecked stagecoach, his gray eyes calm and reassuring. Remember riding with his arm around her waist, feeling safe despite her terror. Remember all the patient lessons that taught her not just how to ride, but how to be brave. What are you thinking? Isaac asked one such evening. He sat beside her, Samuel on his lap, Lydia dozing against Violet's shoulder. About the crash, she said. How frightened I was, how you rode behind me until I found my courage. You always had courage. He reached over and took her hand. I just helped you see it. You did more than that. She squeezed his fingers. You showed me who I could become, gave me space to grow into that person, loved me through all of it. Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done. He lifted her hand to his lips. You are my heart, Violet, you and these babies. Everything that matters. Samuel squirmed down and ran to join Lydia, who had woken and toddled after a butterfly. They played in the long grass, their laughter bright as bells. The sun sank toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Did you ever imagine this? Violet asked softly. When you were alone here before the crash, before me, did you dream of a family? Isaac was quiet a long time. No, he finally said. I thought I would live and die alone. Thought that was what I deserved after the things I had seen, the things I had done in the war. He turned to her, his eyes shining. You gave me back something I thought I had lost, hope, joy, a reason to build instead of just survive. You gave me the same. She leaned her head on his shoulder. We saved each other. We did. He kissed her temple. Best crash I ever survived. She laughed, and the sound mingled with their children's laughter, with the evening song of birds, with the whisper of wind through the pines. This was home. Not just the cabin or the mountains, but this man beside her, these children they had made. This life they had built from courage and love and stubborn determination to create something beautiful in a hard world. Years later, when Samuel was a young man courting a girl from town, he asked his mother how she had known Isaac was the right choice. They were shelling peas on the porch, watching Lydia ride past on her favorite horse, confident as any cowboy. Violet thought about it, her hands moving automatically through the familiar task. Gray threaded her hair now, and lines marked her face, but her eyes were still bright with the joy of her life. I knew when I was most afraid, she said finally. When I thought I could not do something, when I was certain I would fail. Your father never made me feel weak for my fear. He just rode beside me, steady and sure, until I found the strength to ride alone. She smiled at her son. That is what love should be, Samuel. Not someone who makes you feel small or helpless, but someone who believes you are brave even when you do not believe it yourself. Samuel nodded slowly, understanding. Like Pa taught Lydia to ride, never pushing, just patient until she was ready. Exactly. Violet touched his cheek, this boy who had become a man while she blinked. Find someone who sees the best in you, who makes you want to be braver, kinder, better. That is what matters. That evening, the whole family gathered for supper. Isaac had shot an elk, and Violet had roasted it with potatoes and carrots from their garden. They ate around the big table Isaac had built, talking and laughing, planning for the harvest, telling stories. This was what Violet had longed for without knowing it in those suffocating Boston drawing rooms. Not elegance or refinement, but realness. Connection. Love without pretense or performance. After the meal, Isaac pulled her outside to watch the stars emerge. It was their ritual, this quiet time together after the demands of the day. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned into his strength, still finding comfort there after all these years. Happy, he murmured against her hair, impossibly happy. She turned in his arms to face him. The lines on his face had deepened. His beard was more gray than dark now, but his eyes still held that calm certainty that had first drawn her. Every single day I am grateful. For you, for our children, for this life. "I love you," he said simply. "From that first day on the mountain trail when you tried so hard to be brave, I think I started loving you then. I love you too." She reached up to touch his face. "My mountain man, my strength when I was weak, my courage when I was afraid." He kissed her as the stars wheeled overhead, as the wind whispered through the pines, as their children's voices drifted from the house. And Violet knew, bone deep, that she was exactly where she belonged. Not because the West was easier than the East, not because mountain life was simpler than city life, but because love had given her roots deep enough to withstand any storm. The years continued their steady march. Samuel married his sweetheart and built a cabin on the next ridge over. Lydia became a teacher, riding between the scattered mountain homesteads to bring education to isolated children. Isaac and Violet became grandparents, then great-grandparents, their family spreading across the territory like roots from a strong tree. They grew old together in their mountain home. Isaac's strength gradually faded, his steps slowing, but his spirit remained unchanged. Violet's hands grew gnarled with arthritis, but they still reached for his across the table, still fit perfectly into his larger palm. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their family gathered to celebrate. 3 generations filled the house and spilled into the yard, eating and laughing and sharing memories. As the sun set, Isaac pulled Violet away from the crowd, back to their favorite spot overlooking the valley. 40 years, he said wonderingly, feels like both a lifetime and an instant. The best 40 years. Violet leaned against him, their bodies fitting together as they always had. No regrets, none. He was quiet a moment. "Do you ever think about that girl on the stagecoach, the frightened one who could not ride alone?" "Sometimes." Violet smiled. "But she seems like someone from a story, not someone I actually was. That girl had no idea how strong she could be. She was always strong. She just needed the chance to prove it." Isaac turned to face her, his weathered hands cradling her face with infinite tenderness. "You took every challenge this hard life threw at you and conquered it. Raised 2 fine children in rough conditions. Helped me build a life when I thought I was past building. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You made me strong." She covered his hands with hers. "By believing in me, by riding behind me until I could ride alone, by loving me exactly as I was while helping me become who I needed to be. We made each other strong," he corrected. "That is what marriage is, what love is. 2 people holding each other up, taking turns being the strong one until you cannot quite remember where one ends and the other begins." They stood together as darkness fell and the stars emerged, the sounds of their family's celebration drifting up from below. They had built something enduring, Violet thought. Not just a family or a home, but a legacy of courage and love. Their children and grandchildren would carry that forward, would remember that strength comes not from never being afraid, but from facing fear with someone beside you who believes you can. Isaac lived another 5 years, dying peacefully in his sleep at 82. Violet held his hand as he slipped away, whispering promises that she would be fine, that their children would care for her, that she would see him again someday. But her heart broke when his breathing stopped, when those strong hands finally went still. She lived 3 more years without him, cared for by Samuel and Lydia, surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But everyone could see that part of her had gone with Isaac. She spoke of him constantly, remembering their years together with vivid clarity even as recent events faded from memory. On a spring morning much like the one when she had first told him about Samuel, Violet woke feeling different, lighter somehow. She rose and dressed carefully in her best dress, the deep blue one Isaac had always loved. She ate breakfast with Lydia, who had moved in to care for her, chatting about nothing in particular. Then she walked outside to the porch and sat in her rocking chair, looking out at the mountains she had learned to love. The same mountains that had once terrified her, that she had conquered through courage and love. Her eyes drifted closed. That was where Lydia found her an hour later, rocking gently in the morning breeze, a smile on her face at peace. She had gone to join Isaac, her mountain man, her love, her courage. They buried her beside him on the hill above the cabin, overlooking the valley they had made their own. And if you visited that spot on quiet evenings, you might almost hear two voices mingling with the wind through the pines, talking and laughing, as in love and death as they had been in life. Their great-great-grandchildren still tell the story, how their great-great-grandmother came west, frightened and uncertain, and met a mountain man who taught her to be brave. How he rode behind her until she found her courage. How that courage and the love that fostered it built a family that endured for generations. And the moral of the story, they say, is this: true love does not make you weak or dependent. True love gives you strength you never knew you had. True love rides beside you through fear and difficulty, believing in your courage until you believe in it yourself. True love turns frightened girls into mountain women and lonely men into loving husbands and fathers. True love, patient and steadfast and true, can transform everything. That is the legacy Violet and Isaac left. Not just land or money or even their descendants, but the knowledge that love is courage and courage is love, and together they can conquer anything the wild world might throw at you. Even if you start out too frightened to ride a horse alone,